Hope you're doing well whenever and wherever it is in the world that you're watching this. In this video, I'd like to read through parts of Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. These are things that have helped me. I know I still need to work on a good portion of them, but I hope by sharing them with you that you'll find just as much benefit in them as I have. Starting in Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 7, we read, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now in the next chapter, in verse 6, we read that the Lord gives wisdom from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But dear friend, it is God who gives it. Proverbs chapter 3, starting in verse 3, and we'll read down to verse 8. These are things that we need to pay close attention to. We need to remember them as we live from day to day. Proverbs chapter 3, "Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man." Dear friend, as you live, always try. I know it's difficult sometimes, all the time really, but try. Give an earnest effort to be merciful to the people you meet, and always be truthful in whatever it is that you do. Bind these things to your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 3. Verse 5 tells us that we should trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not upon our own understanding. It says in verse 6, "In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil." And verse 8 says all of this. It says, "It will be a health to your flesh and strength to your bones." Why do you need wisdom? Why do you need mercy and truth? Why should you lean on the Lord? Because it will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 27. This is an interesting verse. It says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so." In other words, when you have the power, when you have the opportunity and the ability to do good unto someone, be sure to do it. Do not withhold it from them. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27. Now from chapter 6, Proverbs chapter 6, and verses 16 through 19, we read 6 things that the Lord hates. Proverbs chapter 6, starting in verse 16. "These 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 are an abomination to him." Starting number 1, "A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren." Those are things that the Lord hates. We should always try to avoid doing those things. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 2 through 3 tells us that treasures of wickedness profit nothing. Things that you get through wickedness do you no good. It says, "But righteousness delivers from death. The Lord will not allow the righteous soul to famish, but he casts away the desires of the wicked." Now verse 9 of the same chapter tells us that he who walks with integrity walks securely. It says, "But he who perverts his ways will become known." Verses 11 through 12 tells us that the mouth of the righteous is a well of life. It is a well of life, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 12. From chapter 11, verse 25, we read that the generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. Now that is a poetic way of saying when you do good to someone else, when you do good in general, you're doing good to yourself. He who waters will be watered himself. The generous soul will be made rich. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 15 tells us, "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who heeds counsel is wise." He who heeds counsel is wise. In other words, when you have something that you don't know how to deal with, go to someone. Get your opinions. Get as many things as you can to make your decision. That's why doctors always ask, "Oh, I need a second opinion." But most importantly, dear friend, is we need to take the counsel of God. That should be our number one priority, is getting the counsel of God for the things that we face in our lives. Now Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 18. Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 18 says this, A wrathful man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention." Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18 says here, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Dear friends, these are some things, and I'm afraid it's all we have time for, but these are some things that have benefited me from the book of Proverbs. I would encourage you to read through the whole thing if you get the chance at whatever pace you feel like reading. But I'd like to close with James chapter 1, verse 5. I started talking about wisdom. James chapter 1 and verse 5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, that's me. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Dear friend, if you lack wisdom, I know I do. There's plenty of things I can learn. James chapter 1 and verse 5 says to ask God.